Okay, I guess we could try the tutoring thing. So I think for the most effective tutoring, you read a book, you write it in a diary, then let's just do tutoring all the way. Because, well, maybe 2 tutorings and another write in diary, because we do want more belief. Idea here, we're going to get at least 1 book. Then we got a 1 in 3 chance of getting some patience. Is there another way to get patience? I mean, we could go for a walk, but that doesn't really seem ideal either. We could practice dance. Anyway, then we get to tutoring. At that point, we're guaranteed to have books, so at least 2 of these will do something. And hopefully all 3 will do something. If we get either of the 2 that do something, then on the last time, they're all going to do something. So, I think this makes sense. This should be a good combo. Okay, 1 book. 3 would have been better, but okay, I'll take it. No patience. Not quite what we're looking for here. You're really looking for the bottom one here. Okay, well, at least this is going to do something no matter what. That was the best thing to get, actually. Good job, good job. Alright, I'd say that was actually a pretty productive day. And we're maxed out on art, patience, sympathy. 3 knowledge, 3 patience, 4 sympathy, 4 belief. Sara had been out in the town buying a new book, and as she rode in the comfortable carriage back to Miss Minchin's school, her mind was filling up with stories and histories. Quite unconsciously, she descended the carriage steps with the grace of a queen, looking much grander than she might have imagined, if she were the sort of girl to think in great detail about how she looked. As Sara crossed the pavement, she caught sight of a dingy little figure down on the servants' area steps, a girl with soot-smudged face peering up at her with wide eyes. Aww. Something in the eagerness and timidity of that smudgy face made Sara look back, and when she looked, she smiled because it was her way to smile at people. The eyes went even wider, as if afraid that she ought not to have been caught looking up at a pupil of importance. The maid, if that's what she was, turned and scurried back into the kitchen, vanishing as quickly as a reverse Jack-in-the-Box. Poor little forlorn thing. I wonder who she is. Oh, I wonder if that's going to be our 6th confidant here. Okay, so our next event with Lavina can only happen at week 14 or later. Okay, that's fine. It might be prudent to go for Jessie, just because there's a lot of stuff. Although, actually, no, we got 3 events that require belief. So it actually probably makes the most sense to get one of those out of the way. So it can, start accumulating belief again. So I'm leaning towards Lottie, just because that's going to be the most used up. Well, you'd use more belief, but this uses more stats in general. Though actually, come to think of it, because that'll use up our grace. Which if we don't get sufficient grace, then we can't do Jessie. That might not be that much of a problem, because we should be able to get at least... We use 5 belief here, we currently have 9, that'll leave us on 4 belief. So worst case scenario, we can still use Mariette next turn, and that might not even be a worst case scenario, that might just be what we want to do. And then that gives us time to get the 5 grace required for Jessie. Yeah, I think that makes sense. We'll go Lottie. Sara's room was a bright little jewel in the sometimes drab nest that was Miss Minchin's select seminary. It remained a bright jewel even when Sara was not inside it, which could be seen now by the small figure that crept in through the opened door. Oh, I hope what she's doing what I think she's doing. And what I hope she's doing, what I think she's doing. I hope she's gonna move the doll. Oh, that'll be so fun. Lottie closed the door behind her, then climbed up onto Sara's bed. She placed her legs just a little bit apart, and carefully patted down her skirt to ensure that the petticoats were shown exactly as much and as little as intended. Is now a good time to mention, I don't really know what a petticoat is. Like, I'm assuming it's a small coat, just given the etymology of it. But I don't actually know. Maybe I should look that up. I'm a dolly. Then she laid her arms at her side, tilted back her head, and waited. A minute later, Sara and her maid, Mariette, entered the room. A flower that looks the same upside down as it does right side up? I can't think of... Her voice paused briefly as she came into the room, and Lottie knew she must have been noticed. Quickly she closed her eyes. She would never be able to keep a straight face if she looked at Sara. After that moment, Sara continued. My goodness, Emily must have been busy today. I think she was in such a hurry to get back to her seat when we came in that she didn't quite reach the same position. I see, mademoiselle. Will you tell us what you have been up to, Emily? No? You're very good at keeping secrets. I think we ought to change her clothes and get her ready for bed. She must be very tired. Do not forget the noodle. Lottie fought not to giggle, imagining Sara picking her up next and changing her clothes like a doll. But she had to keep her eyes shut, or she would spoil the joke. Oh, I'm sure she'll be fine. Dolls have to know how to be still for very long periods of time. A doll in a shop window where everyone can see her must stand for hours and hours without even blinking. I would not like to try standing for so long. Here, take Emily's shoes and put them away safely. It would be terrible if she lost them. She needs to be able to run quickly. Yes, mademoiselle. Lottie began to realize that no one intended to pay any attention to her. Sara and Mariette continued to fuss over Emily, adjusting her nightgown and her pillows. The new doll was utterly neglected. Lottie couldn't help herself any longer. She whined. What was that? Oh, Lottie, when did you come in? I thought you were a doll. I don't want to be a doll. Being a doll is boring. Well, I think it's interesting enough for a doll to be a doll, but it's not so much fun for a little girl to be one. Don't you think, Mariette? As you say, mademoiselle. Huh. Oh, new week. The weather was warm and fine. The skies of London unusually clear. As such, Miss Minchin had decided that the proper Sunday outing for her girls was a long walk through parks and gardens. Keep up, keep together. A lady's health is also an important accomplishment. While the temperature outside was not so great in itself, the ceaseless beating of sunlight upon the little heads slowly made their Sunday dresses a difficult burden to bear. This is abominable. My complexion will be ruined. I have to write to my father and complain. She adjusted the position of her parasol on her shoulder and sighed. No proper young lady should be forced to drudge about on foot like this. Is that not why we have horses? Miss Minchin said that horses should have a day of rest on Sundays. As if a horse would never care what day it is. I deserve a carriage. It is due of my rank. Lavina was not the only girl complaining about the walk. Cyril, I'm tired. Everyone is tired. Cyril, would you carry me? You have to walk for yourself. You're too big for me to carry you for long. Besides, it would be undignified. Our Sara may be many things, but she is not a horse. Perhaps you should ask Ermengarde. Oh, snippety little girl. Lavina! What did I say? I was only pointing out that she seems to be handling this walk better than Lottie is. Sara looked at her friend. True enough, though, Ermengarde's cheeks were as flushed as anyone else's. She appeared to be walking steadily along without slowing or complaining. Aren't you tired and hot? Yes, I just don't complain about it so loudly, Keep calm, carry on, and you know? Oh, that's a good thing. If the British government is ever in peril, they can use that. No questions asked. Free of charge, free of royalties. I always feel tired and hot when we walk back from church, so I'm used to it. But this walk is so much longer. It all seems the same to me. Ermengarde has great endurance. It is a virtue. A soldier must have great endurance and be able to carry on through much more difficult circumstances than this. A soldier might have to walk miles in the sun in uniform and carry a heavy pack besides, and be ready to fight when he arrived. Our lives are so much easier, but we must be good soldiers as best we can. If Ermengarde can bear it, then I can bear it. If Jessie can bear it, then I shall have to bear it. What is that supposed to mean? I mean, I know I literally just said the same thing out of Ermengarde, but come on, it's Ermengarde. What did you mean? Nothing. I don't want to bear it. I want someone to carry me, someone to bear me, if you will. You have legs. Use them the same as we are. I don't want to. No one's going to carry you, so if you don't walk, you'll be left here all alone. And then it'll get dark and the tigers will come out and eat you up. I thought tigers were native to India, not England. There aren't any tigers in London. You don't make things up like that. There are actually scarier things in London. Have you heard of this fellow by the name of Jack the Ripper? I hear he specifically murders young girls. Well, not young girls per se, but younger women, which we are sort of that in a sense. Well, she likes it when Sara makes things up. Sara spoke quickly to head off the threat of Lottie deciding to cry and fuss. We will all have tea later in my rooms, and I will tell you stories. But first we must return to the school, which means we must walk. Lottie sighed and carried on. Okay. Alright, our grace is depleted, our belief is low. We're gonna need a lot of belief. Diary is good for belief. What's best for grace? Practicing dancing is not bad. Going for a walk can be fine, but you gotta do the whole, building up your vigor first, which I'm not sure we necessarily are set for that. We don't need any sympathy. I mean, it's gotta be dance, I guess. I mean, you'd hate to be doubling your vigor, but I think that's what you gotta do here. We write in the diary twice. That gets belief up. Then we dance. Perhaps we play with toys first? That way, if on the off chance we get the double vigor, there's a 2/3 chance that it does something. And going for a walk probably isn't a good idea. Probably dance again. And I mean, if we get out of this with a bunch of vigor, that's okay. Obviously, we're aiming for the grace, though. Okay, not bad. You want the belief, that's what we're aiming for, basically. Perfect. That's what we wanted to get out of the diary. Okay, that wasn't what we hoped for there. Okay, that's fine. At least if we get double on the next one, it'll do something. We didn't, which is fine. We weren't really aiming for vigor anyway. Alright, actually pretty good. 2 artistry, 1 vigor, 1 patience, 3 grace, 4 sympathy, and 4 belief. The greatest power Sara possessed was her power of telling stories and of making everything she talked about seem like a story, whether it was one or not. It was that power which Lavina and certain other girls were most envious of, and at the same time most fascinated by, in spite of themselves. And it was in service of that power that so many of Miss Minchin's students had gathered in Sara's jewel box rooms, seating themselves on chairs or cushions or rugs to listen. The princess sat on the white rocks beside the lagoon, with a shining white lily in her hands. As she turned it this way and that, she watched its reflection dance across the water below. The waters of the lagoon lay still, crystal clear, and green as glass, but the princess could only see her flower in the reflection, and never herself. So she looked and saw, and she looked until at last she saw a face in the waters. Not her face, but the face of a merman. Sara went on to tell of the courtship between the princess and the merman prince, and the girls who listened sighed sweetly, and leaned their cheeks against their hands or each other. As they listened, the door to the room swung silently open, and that same dirty figure Sara had glimpsed before crept into the room carrying a heavy coal box. The maid was cleaner than she had been on that day, but seemed just as frightened. She hunched by the fire, afraid even to look at the other children or appear to be listening. She put on pieces of coal cautiously with her fingers so that she might make no disturbing noise, and she swept about the fire ends very softly. But Sara saw what she was doing, her work slowly in hopes of catching a word here and there, and realizing this, she raised her voice and spoke more clearly. The princess took her seat in the great clear bubble carriage, and a team of 6 seahorses pulled her into the ocean, their harness woven with pearls. Down into the sea they dove. At first the water grew dark, and the princess was afraid, but then, far below, fluttering and rippling through the depths, there shone a light. A small drudge before the grate swept the hearth once, and then swept it again, and finally forgot to play at sweeping at all. The brush hung idly from her fingers as Sara described winding grottos beneath the sea, paved with silver and sand and lit by glowing sea stars. It was the choirs of mermaids singing that proved her undoing. The forgotten brush slipped from her fingers to clatter against the hearth, and drew Lavina's attention. What? That girl's been listening? Well, she has ears. You can't exactly turn that off, can you? The culprit snatched up her brush and scrambled to her feet. She grabbed the coal box and simply scuttled out of the room like a frightened insect fleeing for cover. I knew she was listening. Why shouldn't she? She isn't one of us, Sara. It isn't proper to talk with servants. Unless they are upper servants, like your marionette. That's all right. I wasn't talking with her. I was telling a story. I don't know whether your papa would like you to tell stories to servant girls, but I know my papa wouldn't like me to do it. My papa? I don't believe he would mind in the least. He knows that stories belong to everybody. Nothing belongs to everybody. If it did, they'd have to fight over it. Only Laurel Ermengarde took Sara's side. I think Sara should tell stories to whomever she wants to tell them. You wouldn't think it wrong if she told stories to Tybalt, would you? I should think it is rather odd if she were telling stories to a cat. Oh, please, Sara, Mama, finish the story. Sara looked at the room full of eager, upturned faces. No one wished to follow and harass the fleeing maid, but no one wished to go and invite her back again either. She would continue her fairy story, but she would not forget. Okay. Alright, so as expected, we don't have the grace for Jesse yet, so we're going to be going... Oh, this is the last chance for Ermengarde? I do know probably at a certain point we're going to have to start just losing events, but that day is not this day. Ermengarde sat contentedly on the floor of Sara's room, listening to her read from one of her storybooks. And then he offered to take her away to his father's court, where he would make her his bride. The maiden adored the prince whose company had charmed her for so many hours, but she could not bear to leave her sisters without first telling them farewell. She bade the prince to leave and return again the next day to the palace in the woods where they had met, or the place in the woods, not the palace necessarily, but it could have been a palace. A palace in the woods sounds so romantic, doesn't it? Sara did not read the words exactly as they were written, but put her own little touches upon the story to make it turn out the way she had preferred, such as by placing a palace in the woods to make the meeting place seem more grand. It was not quite the same as telling her own stories, but Ermengarde still seemed nervous at the idea of stories that had not come from books at all. It was a first step. Once he had gone, she rushed back to her home to take up her work at the wheel, planning to spin twice as fast to cover for her absence. But when she sat down at the wheel, she was dismayed to find that her magical thread had lost all of its brightness. Her heart beat faster, and she wept bitterly, for she remembered her mother's warning and knew not what misfortune might now befall her. She was so afraid that she would be punished for what she had done that she ran away without telling anyone what had happened, not even her beloved sisters. She ran through the woods looking for her prince, but he was on horseback and long since gone. And while she ran, she did not watch where she was going, and so she tripped over a root and fell into a rushing river, disappearing into the swift currents. Thus the misfortune was complete. She drowned? Not quite. Sara continued her story, how the maiden was transformed into a golden water lily, who sang her sorrow, and how she was at last restored to life by the love of her sisters. Ermengarde sighed in contentment. When I hear stories in your voice, I can almost see them happen. You are much better than books. But what about the prince? Doesn't he marry her in the end? He rode over the bridge by the river and heard her singing, but he didn't do anything to save her. It was her sisters who loved her enough to look for her when she was lost. I thought princes were always heroes. Well, Ermengarde, it is a common trope, but sometimes the most compelling story is one that departs from known conventions, one that truly shocks you and makes you think. Anyone could be a hero in the right circumstances. I don't think I could. Ermengarde looked around Sara's room, decorated as it was with the best of at least 3 countries: dependable England, refined France, and exotic India. Do you miss being in India, Sara? Yes, of course. It was my home, and I was happy there. I had my house, and my pets, and my ayah, and the skies were never foggy and grey like they are here in London. I loved living there. But I love it most of all because it is where my papa will be. Ermengarde saw Sara's face suddenly change. A cloud seemed to pass over it and put out the light in her shining eyes. She drew her breath in so sharply that it made a funny little sound. Then she shut her lips and held them tightly closed, as if she was determined either to do or not to do something. Have you a pain? Oh, we are practicing French now. No, I do not have any bread for you. We could perhaps ask my maid to get some snacks from the kitchen if you'd like. There was a moment of silence in which Ermengarde worried that she might have spoken out of turn, but at last Sara answered. Yes, but it is not in my body. Her voice was low and somewhat unsteady. Do you love your father more than anything else in all the whole world? Ermengarde's mouth fell open a little. She knew that it would not be correct for a respectable child at a select seminary to say that she did not adore her father. Could not imagine being even so much as fond of him. I scarcely ever see him. In fact, she did her very best to avoid being left alone in his company for more than a few minutes. It was not a proper feeling for a daughter, perhaps, and it was clearly not something that Sara would understand. Ermengarde was indeed greatly embarrassed. He is always in the library, reading things, so I'm sure you can imagine why we don't exactly get along. There's a wealth of information in that statement, if Sara had been inclined to decipher it, but she's too preoccupied with her own feelings. I love mine more than all the world 10 times over. That is what my pain is. It has gone away. She put her head quietly down on her little huddled-up knees and sat very still for a few minutes. Ermengarde had an idea that if she had been like any other little girl, Sara might have suddenly burst out sobbing and crying. But she did not. Her short black locks tumbled about her ears, and she sat still. Then she spoke without lifting her head. I promised him I would bear it, and I will. You have to bear things. Papa's a soldier, and think what soldiers bear. If there's a war, he would have to bear marching and thirstiness and perhaps deep wounds, and he would never say a word, not one word. Ermengarde could only gaze at Sara, but she felt that she was beginning to adore her. She was so wonderful and different from anyone else. Presently, Sara lifted her face and shook her black locks with a queer little smile. If I go on talking and talking, I shall bear it better. You don't forget, but you bear it better. I will talk to you as much as you like if it helps you. Looking at the hearth in the room, Sara was reminded of the little servant she had seen before. In truth, she had looked for the girl earlier, but had been unable to spot such a person anywhere in the school. If not for the disagreement with her listeners, Sara might have thought she had imagined her. Sara understood that it would cause disruption if she barged into the kitchens to ask questions. She had only one bridge to rely on. Mariette, who is that little girl who makes the fires? Ah, Mademoiselle Sara. You might well ask that poor little one. She has just recently been taken on as a scullery maid, though scullery is the least of it. She is sent to do every task that no one else wants. Oh. Is that the... Guess she's bottom of the totem pole? Getting assigned all the jobs no one likes? She blacks the boots and grates. She carries the coal scuttles up and down stairs. She scrubs the floors and the windows. I think she has not had enough to eat for years. She is older than her height would tell you, and so timid if I try to speak to her, her little eyes look to pop right out of her head. What is her name? I hear that called often enough. Becky, do this, Becky, do that. Everyone below stairs orders her about. Becky. If life were a story, Becky might be the ill-used heroine, and perhaps a fairy godmother might come to rescue her. You have a kind heart, mademoiselle. Your papa would be proud. Now stand up straight, let me have a look at you. All right. Just as I thought. You are growing taller. I am? Sara looked down at herself. I don't feel any different. How much have I changed since I've been here? You're at the age, after all. I will have to alter you a few things. How tall I will grow before I see my papa again. Okay, gotta get belief up big time. And grace. I mean, belief's good. Diary's good for belief. And the dance is good for grace. I mean, we could just roll with this again. I mean, statistically, we're probably gonna get... I want to get to at least 4 belief. So maybe we cut up playing with toys. Because we don't need the grace as thoroughly. So we cut up playing with toys in favor of writing in the diary, I think. I think that makes sense. Yeah, just to ensure, because if we get the 1 and then we could get patience instead, yeah, that's no good. So hopefully, we got a 2/3 chance of getting what we want here. I probably would have preferred the other, but I mean, creeping up the knowledge, but it's not bad. Like, not the best dancing. Okay, I mean, getting the vigor up, I mean, eventually we're going to use the vigor, right? We got 2 knowledge, 2 artistry, 2 vigor, 4 patience, 2 grace, and 2 belief. Very well-rounded week. Sara, come here. A number of students were drawn to the sound of Ermengarde's excitement. It It was not often that a girl would call for such attention in her bedroom, particularly not quite Miss St. John.
What is it? Look through the window there. The tree outside, can you see it?
From the door to the room, Lavina smirked.
I should hope she can see the tree outside, or else she needs eyeglasses.
I'm sure there's probably like a bird or something on the tree.
Hush! What do you want me to see, Ermengarde? There's a nest in the branches there, and there are eggs in it. Soon there will be baby birds. That's darling, isn't it? Babies? Where? Must everyone come into my room?
If you don't wish to attract attention in the future, do not bellow.
Where are the babies? They're still inside the eggs, Lottie. There will be baby birds sometime in the future. Can baby birds see inside eggs?
They have no need of seeing while they're inside the eggs.
I don't know. Could be like a one-way mirror type of situation, I guess, in theory. No, I think they're asleep. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a bird for a pet? You could feed it from your hand and it would sing to you. Baby birds are not wonderful. They're horrible, pink-skinned monsters with no eyes. Disgusting. Monsters? No, they aren't very pretty but when they're born, but they change as they grow up. There's a lot of things do. So soon, little birds are covered with fuzz all over. Fluffy chicks are adorable. But then they grow up and learn to fly. Even if I tried to keep a bird as a pet, it'd probably fly away. There are people in India who kept parrots as pets. Not even in cages. They can be trained to ride on someone's shoulder. My papa knew a man who gave his bride-to-be a parrot that he taught to recite love poetry to her. How romantic. I don't think a bird is a very romantic gift. What if she didn't want a pet? What if it pulled her hair? Lavina reached out and tugged at a strand of Jessie's long red hair. Quack! My beloved is mine, and I am hers. She feedeth among the lilies. Quack! Stop that! She swatted Lavina's hand away. Are you going to take one of the eggs out of the nest to raise it? Oh, no, that wouldn't be right. Little birds need their parents to survive. Jessie combed her hair back into place with her fingers. At least until their parents shove them out of the nest. Birds do that, don't they? Do they, Sir Mama? Only when it's time for them, the young ones, to learn to fly. After all, they can't stay eggs forever.